Tammie's heart leapt, and she clung to the wall as her legs gave way beneath her. She had to get down there. She had to see her father. She broke her gaze away from that group of people and stumbled down the steps, nearly missing every other one and skinning her elbow as she went. As she crossed the courtyard with her eyes fixed on the gate, neither hearing nor seeing anything else, others joined her. They too had seen that ecstatic group of Jesus followers, and the pull to get out there to them was as sharp and painful as the grief had been. They tore the bar from the gate, all fingers and thumbs, and spilled, tripping over each other, out into the world again. They had cut themselves off for so many days. It was like being freed from a prison. Those left inside, amazed at their behaviour, came straggling out after them, bemused and breathless. When they rounded the corner, the group dancing down the road caught sight of them, and in an instant set off running. So many old friends, their faces beaming with joy. Jairus and his 2 colleagues from the council, Salome, Naomi's friend, who Jesus had healed of the most terrible bleeding, and Daniel's mum, and Jesus' own mother, and Simon Peter, Andrew, James and John, Thomas, Matthew and the rest of the 11, the ex-lame guy who had come through Dibs' roof, and many, many people Tammie had never seen before, from Judea, Syria, Africa, Greece. Even a Roman centurion was in there, cheerily waving among the rest. Even people from Samaria, for goodness sake. They usually never came anywhere near Capernaum. Samaritans looked down on Judeans and Galileans nearly as much as Judeans and Galileans looked down on Samaritans. The only thing they all agreed on was wanting to kick out the Romans. What had brought this weirdly mismatched crew together, and how could they be so happy? "He's alive! He's alive!" They were all shouting at the top of their lungs, and those who had emerged from Tammie's house just stood there blinking, staring helplessly at them. When the newcomers reached them, it was like being hit by a bucket of ice water or a fresh strong wind that snatches the breath from your mouth and knocks you flying, blowing all the rubbish out of your mind and making you want to scream and shout and do cartwheels, even if you know you can't do cartwheels. The new arrivals grabbed someone they knew. Quite a few grabbed someone they didn't know, and hugged and squeezed and kissed them until they too were laughing hysterically through their exhaustion and wondering if the entire world had gone mad or just this bit of it. Jairus enveloped Tammie and her mother in a bear hug and lifted them off their feet, swinging them round and round and round until there was no way of knowing which way was up, let alone what could have happened. Tammie clung tightly to her father, with her nose squashed up against his armpit, and cried and laughed and spluttered snot into his tunic. "He's alive," said Jairus when he put them down again. "He is alive." It seemed to be all most of them were capable of saying in the avid conversations taking place throughout the crowd. "How?" the others were gasping. "Was there a reprieve? Did you rescue him? Did they cut him down before he died?" No, interrupted the centurion, who had been swapping stories in Latin with Lucius and Marcellus at double speed. "He was dead. I checked." "Of course," said Daniel in amazement. "You were one of the soldiers who was taking him to be killed." "I was in charge," the centurion said solemnly. "But there is no doubt. It was important for them that he must be seen to be dead. Very important prisoner to them. I know what I am doing. He was dead." They looked at each other with open mouths, and round at the newcomers who beamed back at them. "And he's alive now?" said Naomi, just to make sure they were following this correctly. "Oh, yes, he's alive, they chorused, going back to their favourite phrase. "I put him into my tomb," said Jairus' friend Joseph, his face shining with joy in a way that seemed oddly moving, considering the sad things he was saying. I plucked up all my courage to ask Pilate for the body, and he gave it to me. I knew it was dangerous to let them know I supported Jesus, but I couldn't bear to think of him being left lying around for the birds and animals, or thrown into some pit with murderers and thieves. He died like a criminal, but I wanted him to be buried like a nobleman. We took him, Nicodemus and me, and bathed and anointed him. Then we carefully wrapped him in grave cloths and laid him in the tomb. We thought we were saying goodbye to him. Then we left him there, and a squad of soldiers moved in to guard the tomb. They thought we might steal the body and try to claim he wasn't dead. That was the last thing on our minds. Our world had ended. We couldn't have carried on without him. "Well," demanded Benjamin, hopping around with impatience, "you keep telling us he's alive, but everything you've said is about him being dead." "Of course," said Jairus, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "He had to die first before he could be alive again, didn't he?" "But are you sure he's alive?" persisted Benjamin. "The tomb was empty," began Salome. "Maybe one of his followers did take the body," said Benjamin helplessly. "How can we ever know?" "Will you listen?" said Salome, who was spilling over with what she wanted to tell them. "The tomb was empty when a few of the women and I went early on the morning after Shabbat. We'd bought perfumed spices to anoint his body. We wondered how we would get in, but because the huge round stone at the entrance was vast, but it had been rolled to one side." "Are you sure you went to the right tomb?" said Rachel, trying to be helpful. "Quite sure," said Salome firmly. "For one thing, we had watched from a distance when Joseph put him in, so we knew which one it was. And for another, there were angels in shining robes, one sitting on the stone and the other one inside." There was a gasp from all who hadn't heard the story before, and any other objections went out of their minds. "That's nothing," whispered Jairus with a twinkle in his eye. "Keep listening." "They told us not to be afraid," laughed Salome. "We were terrified. Then the one inside the tomb showed us the place where he had been lying, with the grave cloths crumpled as if he'd simply disappeared from inside them, and the headpiece all neatly folded up. He told us that Jesus had risen from the dead, and that we should tell Simon Peter and the others. They thought we'd gone mad, of course, but that didn't matter because then—" She broke off and began laughing and weeping and squeezing Naomi's arm. "Oh, I'm sorry, my dears," she said, wiping her eyes. "I still can't think of it. Then we saw him, Jesus himself, our Lord, right there in the flesh, strong and alive and so beautiful. He was just as when we knew him, just as he used to be before he died, only more so, much, much more so. Oh, I know I'm rambling and not making any sense, but he was shining and alive and real, so much more alive than before he died. He was magnificent." "You actually saw him," breathed Naomi in wonder. "You recognized that it was him?" "Yes, well, no, not straight away," said Salome, trying to collect herself and tell her story more sensibly. "My friend Mary from Magdala across the lake, she saw him first. She thought he was the gardener. We still didn't know what to believe. It was such a turnaround, we just couldn't take it in. But then, when he greeted us, we saw. It was as if we'd never seen clearly before in our lives. We threw ourselves at his feet and worshipped him. We just hugged his feet and kissed and wept on them." "You've actually seen him. You've touched him and talked to him," Naomi kept repeating. And now the other followers don't think you're mad. Now they believe that what you said was true. They didn't really need to, said Salome. He's appeared to most of them too. What? Was the general response to that. Oh, yes, said Salome. That was just the first time. He appeared to Simon Peter, and then the 11. Without Thomas, cut in Jairus. Yes, and then the 11 with Thomas, continued Salome. And he had something to eat because they were afraid he was a ghost. And lots of the rest of us were there both times. And our friends over there, said Joseph, pointing to two men jabbering away to Caleb, who was listening open-mouthed. Yes, and Cleopas and what's his name, said Jairus. They were leaving Jerusalem on that first day. And Jesus caught them up and walked with them for miles without letting them see who he was. They didn't realize until they were at supper with him, and he broke the bread and then disappeared. They came tearing all the way back to Jerusalem. By then, many of us had seen him too. They told us that as they walked, he taught them all sorts of things from the ancient scriptures about how they predicted his trial and death, and that he would come back to life. What things? Asked Tammie. She felt as if pieces of a puzzle, hidden in plain sight from the dawn of time, were dancing flauntingly before her eyes, and she was eager for them to jiggle into place and make sense. Oh, all sorts, said Jairus, flinging his arms out in a gesture that seemed to include everything, and nearly hitting a couple of fishermen who were walking up the road and glaring at them for being in the way. They start to pop out at you from all over. I wonder if he'll ever appear to anyone again, said Lucius, hardly daring to hope. Oh, yes, said Salome, as if it were all settled, which indeed it was. That's why we're here. It was part of the message from the angels and from Jesus himself. Didn't I tell you? No, said everyone who had not been in Jerusalem most emphatically. We were told to tell Peter and the others to go to Galilee, and he would meet them there. Their mouths dropped open at this, and they all started looking over their shoulders. No point, smiled Jairus. When he wants you to see him, you will, believe me. Even locked doors don't make a difference. And in the meantime, we really might as well go inside and get something to eat. Ah, well, there we go. Jesus is alive again, and he said he's going to meet them in Galilee, where Tammie lives. This has been a real whistle-stop tour of the book. A little bit breathless, but I have enjoyed so much doing it. Thank you for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed it too. And yeah, it's just amazing that even though we're all having to stay in our homes over so much of the world, we can still connect in this way. And I really want to thank you very much for connecting with me. It's been fantastic. Take care, stay safe, look after each other. God bless you all.